Good morning, everyone. I'm Kimberly Chalia with PHCA. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar, Important Steps to Take Now to Avoid Payment Suspensions with Paula Sanders. A few quick updates to share before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the PHCA website. The webinar has been approved for one continuing education credit for all attendees. For those who provided a NAB number, credits will be uploaded shortly. We'll also share certificates with those in attendance. Please feel free to submit your questions by selecting the activities icon at the bottom right corner of your screen and then selecting Q&A. We'll make sure to answer as many of those questions as possible at the end of today's presentation. And now I'll turn it over to Paula. Paula, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. We're going to take a deep dive into the new emphasis on revalidations. We're getting lots of questions and concerns from people who are running into problems with revalidations. Let me just see if the screen is moving forward, but it does not seem to be going forward. So give me one second here while I just try and reboot it. So Kim, are you still on? There we go.
Did you get it?
Yep, I've got it now. So the learning objectives for today is, first, we're going to go over what CMS requires for timely reporting of changes. Then we're going to spend some time talking about what you can do if you can't find your most recent 855 and you don't know what Medicare has on file. Then we'll also show you how to get and correct the information from CMS. So we'll start first here. I just wanted to go over a couple acronyms. Obviously, CMS you're familiar with. When we talk for the skilled nursing facilities in terms of the paper enrollment forms, we're going to be talking specifically about the CMS 855A. The other new terms that you may not be familiar with are the NSVC, which is the National Site Visit Contractor. And that is a separately engaged national contractor that works with CMS to do on-site visitations for certain types of Medicare providers, including now skilled nursing facilities. And we're going to talk at length about them. So let's start first and really look at what you're required to be reporting. If you had an 855A in front of you, or you were looking at the Medicare regulations, you would know you need to report all entities who have an ownership interest in your facility of a 5% or more interest, whether it's a direct interest or an indirect interest. Additionally, you have to report partnerships, right? So if you have a partnership who's part owner of your organization, you have to report all general partnerships, regardless of their percentage, including all interests in a non-limited partnership and all general partnerships in a limited partnership. You also need to report for limited partnerships, the limited partners, if their interest in the partnership is at least 10%. You also have to be reporting mortgage or security interests, and that includes any entity that has at least a 5% mortgage, deed or trust, or other security interest in the facility. You also, for organizations, need to report any organization that has managing control interest, which is defined as any organization that exercises operational or managerial control over the provider or conducts the day-to-day operations, even if that organization doesn't have an ownership interest in the provider. Now, I want to stop there just for a minute to talk about who would and would not fall into the organizational managing control interest. Obviously, if you are a management company or you're overseen by a management company, that organization would need to be reported on your 855A. Many organizations are trying to move away from the concept of exercising operational or managerial control over nursing homes and say they're providing consulting services. So if you're confused or concerned, my recommendation would be that you speak to counsel to determine what reporting obligations you as the facility have, right? Because we're talking about the nursing homes 855A. Do you have to be reporting the management slash consulting company who's working with you? If the consulting company or management company can appoint your board members or has the ability to appoint the nursing home administrator, it's possible that CMS or its contractors would assume that that entity is exercising managerial control over the provider. In Section 6 of the 855A, that's where we're going to be reporting the individuals, right? Section 5 is organizations. Section 6 is individuals. You have to report every individual with an ownership interest of greater than or equal to 5%, whether it's a direct or indirect ownership. You have to report as well all individuals with a partnership interest. And you have to be reporting officers and directors, whether your entity is for-profit or nonprofit. An officer is any person whose position is listed as an officer in your articles of incorporation or corporate bylaws, or anyone who's appointed by the board of directors as an officer. A director, for purposes of Section 6, is a member of the governing body or board of directors, unless your DON or your other division directors are also serving as a director slash member of the governing body. You don't need to report them. So just the fact that I am a director of operations or a director of nursing, I don't get reported under this particular provision, right? That title director does not go to whether I'm a member of the governing body or board of directors. So you need to be careful on that, because we have seen 855s where people have been reporting their directors of nursing, for example, as a director under Section 6, and that's not where they belong. They may, however, belong under this next provision, which is where you are going to be reporting your managing employees. Managing employees would be people like your general manager, your business manager, your administrator, your director, or any other individual who exercises operational or managerial control over, or who directly or indirectly conducts the day-to-day operations, either under contract or through some other arrangement, regardless of whether the individual is a W-2 employee. So their status, they don't have to be employed by you. If they're contracted, they would have to go under the managing employee category. We also, under Section 6, are reporting authorized officials. And authorized officials are people who are appointed by the organization It could be your CEO, your CFO, a general partner, a board chair, or a direct owner, for instance. But it's somebody who has the legal authority to enroll your nursing home in the Medicare program, to make changes or updates to the organization's status in the Medicare program, and to commit the organization to fully abide by the statutes, regulations, and program instructions of the Medicare program. So if you're identifying somebody as the authorized official, to the outside world, they're going to look to that person as the person who's got that legal authority to be doing all sorts of things. But it's also operationally, for purposes of enrollment, the person who can make changes and updates to the status of your information. Now, the authorized official can delegate authority, right, to the delegated officials. And this is another provision in the 855. Who is my delegated official? It's somebody that the authorized official has given authority to report changes and make updates to the enrollment record. Here, pay attention to the fact that a delegated official has to be an individual with an ownership interest in the nursing home or a control interest, or they have to be a W-2 managing employee of the provider. So we go back just for a minute here and look at the managing employee. I can be a managing employee, but I don't need to be a W-2 employee, right? So for purposes of, am I a managing employee, that could be your nursing home administrator. A lot of times that's who facilities identify as the managing employee. And if they're employed, they can be identified as the delegated official, which means I can be both the managing official and I'm a managing employee, but I also have the authority to go into PCOS or to submit the 855 change of information. So that delegated official role is a very important role. We're recommending that facilities identify more than one person to serve in that delegated official capacity, because you want to make sure you have more than one person who can access your enrollment data, just like you're trying to find more than one person who can input information into NHSN. We're recommending that people start to think more constructively about who might best fill these roles of delegated officials. And why is this important? And it's something I think as an industry we've overlooked for quite some time. And that is the fact that Medicare requires institutional providers like nursing homes to notify them within 30 days if there's a change of ownership, if there's a change in control, or if there's a change in the authorized official or the delegated official. That's a 30-day time frame. Very few providers are doing that. All other changes to enrollment must be reported within 30 days. So let's take an example. We've identified our nursing home administrator as a managing employee, right? That's the person who's got day-to-day control. And we've also identified them as the delegated official, right? My authorized official has told my NHA that you're now my delegated official. That NHA has left. Obviously, you've notified the Department of Health. You're all really good about doing that. But where we're falling down is we're not notifying Medicare of that change. So if my delegated official is also my managing employee as an NHA, I've got to report within 30 days. If my NHA, in this example, is not my delegated official, I have to notify Medicare within 90 days. Nonprofits have to report anytime their board members change, right? That has to be reported to Medicare within 90 days. And we're going to go through some examples of what these problems look like when people miss this. We're getting a lot of calls where people are saying, my Medicaid revalidation is getting bounced. I can't find my 855. I have no idea what we reported to Medicare a long time ago. How do I know what Medicare thinks we've reported? Because DHS is saying our information is inconsistent. If you go to Medicare Compare, and you can type in, Medicare Nursing Home Compare, or here's the website, you go to that page, and the first thing that's going to pull up for you is this find and compare with this woman smiling very happily at you. You go down, and if you know your location, put it in. For this purpose, I just typed in Chicago, Illinois, because I didn't want to pull up anybody in Pennsylvania. But you could put in your zip code. You could put in just Pennsylvania. You could type in your specific town and the name of your facility. You don't need to put it in, but the next page that's going to pop up is going to have, if you did a broader search, a list of facilities. When you click on your facility, you'll get another page that comes up. And what you want to do is scroll down to the bottom of that screen, and you'll come to this little box that's on the bottom right of the slide that says ownership type. It'll say whether you're a for-profit, nonprofit, government-owned. It'll have your legal business name. And then there's that little square box that says ownership details. So if you click on that box, what comes up is what Medicare currently has on file. So you'll see here, although it's a little hard to see, the legal business name of the facility, its ownership type. In this case, it's a for-profit limited liability company, and the contact information. Now, if I go down further, I'm going to see who the owners and managers are. So it gives me the owners who have a 5% or greater direct ownership. I'll get a list if there are people with an indirect ownership. I've got the name of the person who's got operational or managerial control. I have the name of an officer. I have 2 people who are identified as the managing employee, and I have the entity that has a 5% or greater security interest. So when you put in the information for your own facility, you'll see in some instances that your ownership is correct and current, but maybe your officers have changed, or your managing employees have changed. In some cases, people have been so remiss in updating CMS that there's no one current on the enrollment data, which means there's no existing person who has the authority to access PCOS or to submit the 855 because they've never been registered. And in that case, you need to work with PCOS to get a proof of who is the authorized official. Then the authorized official has to get a delegated official so that you can access that information. Another place where you can get information on enrollment is going to Novitas, right? Most Pennsylvania facilities have Novitas as their Medicare administrative contractor. If you go to the Novitas website, they have a link to the paper-based enrollment. You can also work with them through their site to get online with PCOS. They also have tutorials on how to fill out the forms. So it's a really good website. It will tell you where you need to file the 855 if you are with Medicare, if Novitas is your MAC. So you may want to check that website out as well. My recommendation, however, is if you're not signed up for PCOS, that you get signed up, have somebody get signed up as quickly as you can, because it is so much easier to enroll through PCOS and make change of information than it is to do the paper 855. Here's the site for PCOS. When you pull up the first page, you're going to see information on how to become a registered user if you're not already a registered user, and wonderful tutorials on how to change your information if that's what you need to do. If you're not able to get into PCOS quickly and you need to do the 855 to send in a change of information, when you look at the 855, you'll see a box that basically says, check one box and complete the sections, right? So I want to change my Medicare information. I realize I haven't done it in a long time. So I click the little box that says I'm submitting the 855 because I'm changing my Medicare information. I've put it down in that box, my Medicare identification number and my NPI, and then it tells me go to section 1B. And 1B walks me through what things I need to complete depending on what I'm changing. So if I'm changing my identifying information, it tells me what blocks I need to go to. If I have to update adverse legal actions or convictions, I go to a different section. And you use this as your checklist for figuring out how many pieces of information you need to be updating. What are potential problems that people are running into? One of the big ones is I'm filling out the Medicaid revalidation, and my IRS name, the legal business name, is the Paula Sanders Nursing Home, comma, LLC. When I fill out the revalidation form, I write Paula Sanders Nursing Home, and I don't put the LLC. I'm going to get bounced, right? Whatever form was submitted to IRS, whether it's got capital T, small t, commas, periods, LLC, you've got to pull up your IRS documents if you can find them. That's the safest way, right? To make sure that whatever name you're putting down on the enrollment or revalidation form matches your IRS to the period. This is one where you've got to dot your I's and cross your T's. Another reason people are getting their revalidations kicked out is because the individual's names aren't matching. Say I got married, right? Medicare still has me as Smith, but my married name or my maiden name, if I've gotten divorced, is different. It's Jones. If I don't think back to the fact that, did I notify Medicare that my name changed and I'm filling out the new document with my new legal name, but I haven't gone in to change my old name, it's going to get bounced because there's a disconnect. If you know somebody as Nick and you write that down in one, for whatever reason you're reporting this individual, but Nick's full legal name is Nicholas, that's going to get bounced. Likewise, if someone has gone for years and years and is only known to the public by a certain name, but when they got their social security number, it was registered under a different formulation, it's going to get bounced because they take every name that's associated with your 855 and the social security numbers that are required to be reported, and they run that through the Social Security Administration. So if that doesn't match, your application is going to be rejected. The larger potential problem that we're seeing right now is for people who have not updated their 855s, and the person, there are one or more individuals still in the Medicare system, but not being reported when you do the update, right? So if you have board members who have long since been affiliated with you, but you're filling out the new revalidation and you don't include them, but they're still showing up in Medicare, that would be a disconnect, as an example. And we'll look at a few other disconnects in a minute here. But here would be an example, right? This is a copy of an email that a Pennsylvania nursing home got that says, their enrollment application is suspended for revisions, 30-day notice. Dear provider, thank you for submitting an electronic enrollment application for participation in the medical assistance program. Your application is being suspended for revisions. You can resume your application, view comments to determine what is required, and resubmit by visiting the provider portal. Select resume application, enter the following information, and it gives you the application tracking number, whether you used your federal tax ID number or your social security number, and the password. So that's how you get back into your system, right? Then you have to submit the corrections within 30 calendar days of whenever you get this notice. Applications that are not resubmitted with the requested information will be considered incomplete and no longer available for updates. So if you get in that situation, and this is why it's so critically important to make sure you are up to date with your Medicare information, you may not know, right? If you got to do this by paper, so you get this application, you notice that you're only have 30 days to fix this. But let's say this gets bounced around in your facility for a while. So now you've only got 15 days left by the time you look at it, and you go in and you're trying to figure out what's missing here. What am I doing wrong? And you identify the fact that Medicare has 2 administrators listed who haven't been with your organization in the last 4 years. You're the new administrator, but you're not in the Medicare data. If you have to do this by paper to get that change done, you may miss that 30-day correction period. On the other hand, if you are enrolled with PICOS, you can go online and make those changes very, very quickly. So another notice, late revalidation letter, right? This is an organization, their revalidation should have been started the beginning of January. They haven't sent it in yet. They get this bizarre letter from the Department of Health or Department of Human Services that says you haven't been revalidated. Now, mind you, the revalidation isn't due until March 1, but they're late in submitting their information. It goes on to say that you're getting this notice that you're not revalidated, you may be disenrolled from the medical assistance program, and you have a right to appeal. However, there's been no formal action taken yet. If you get one of these letters, reach out immediately, get that information started, get your revalidation data in. You may have a period of time where you're not going to get paid by Medicaid because they're backed up, they're running late, and if you get out of queue, they don't expedite, right? We have and are hearing stories of folks who, because information was not corrected quickly, or they just completely missed the revalidation letter, they have a significant cash flow issue up to $500,000. And Medicaid is not really sympathetic if you were late in responding to them. The other thing that you may want to be doing, if you haven't done it already, is to make sure that the promise system has emails for the appropriate people, so they're not getting bounce back from employees who are no longer with your organization. These are time critical issues that you need to be very careful and attentive to, not just in terms of responding quickly, but responding accurately and responding consistently with the information that is on file with Medicare. So let me give you some other examples of where people have gotten into trouble. If there was an adverse action taken against an owner, a managing employee, an authorized or delegated official, your medical director, your supervising physician, or other personnel who are furnishing Medicare reimbursable services, you can be revoked, right? So I've got somebody listed on my 855, say it's a board member who had a felony conviction for drug diversion. And I didn't know that because I don't screen my board members. You're going to get a notice that Medicare has revoked you. And the only way you get that revocation reversed, if that revocation was due to an adverse activity, is you have to be able to submit proof that you terminated your business relationship with that individual within 30 days of the date that CMS or the MAC notified you that you were being revoked because of this adverse activity. I know that a lot of facilities are doing sanction screenings, but you want to really look to make sure you are capturing key personnel who you might not otherwise think to screen, because this Medicare revocation is a death knell if you have a high Medicare volume. Here's an example of a facility of a provider whose enrollment was deactivated. And this person, this medical practice, got a letter saying from Novitas, one of their physicians died in 2020. The Medicare enrollment application identified the doctor as a 5% or greater direct or indirect owner. Novitas did not receive a Medicare enrollment application reporting the change in ownership and or managing control. So they deactivated their billing rights and then went on to say Please notify all physician assistants and or group members who reassign benefits to your organization that, in accordance with the regulations, their Medicare enrollment status may be deactivated if they fail to update their enrollment record within 90 calendar days. So again, it's broad ranging. Somebody can retire, they can pass away, they can be separated from your employment. But if your information is not current and Medicare finds out about it, they can deactivate you, they can revoke you. And I wanted to share these two examples because they're very recent and it's a lot of work to try and get reactivated. The next area that I wanted to talk to you guys about is another change. Back in 2011, CMS instituted a hierarchy of risk and screening for all sorts of Medicare providers. In 2011, nursing homes were identified as low categorical risk. A high categorical risk organization was something like a durable medical equipment company or a home health agency. Those areas where there was rampant fraud in the early implementation of this program. CMS very, very recently said, we're reevaluating our risk level assignments. And effective January of 2023, we don't think that nursing homes are safe anymore. They pose a huge risk to the Medicare integrity program, and we're elevating them to the high risk for screening levels. Whenever there's a change of ownership, whenever there is a restructuring, such as an introduction of new partners or owners with 5% or more ownership interests, or if there's a new enrollment. So anyone going through a CHOW that starts after January 1, people who are already in process, don't worry about it. This does not apply. This high-level scrutiny doesn't apply to you for a CHOW. But if you're restructuring after January 1 and you're moving ownership percentages as a restructuring, you may fall into this high categorical risk. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the other thing that CMS did is said, okay, if we're going through CHOWs, we're going to really scrutinize, but we're also going to raise SNFs to the moderate screening level for revalidations. Why are they seen as high risk? If you look at the regulations and the preamble, you'll see that CMS has expressed increasing concern about nursing facilities' potential and actual criminal behavior. And they referenced a number of false claim settlements, including many that related to upcoding, alleged upcoding for therapy rugs. And commentators said, well, a settlement agreement is not proof of anything. There's always a disclaimer. And the government agrees with that, right? When you enter into a settlement agreement, usually you're not admitting liability, and the government says they're not saying you actually did this, but it's a mutual agreement. And other commentators said, CMS, you're just wrong. That old therapy system, billing system, we're under a whole new system now. So, you're just sort of making stuff up, if you will. And this was CMS's response. Providers and suppliers are obligated to abide by Medicare requirements, regardless of the mechanism by which they are paid. We cannot disregard improper activity merely because it happened under a former payment system. In addition, to the extent the settlements in question did not, as part of the agreement, include an official admission of wrongdoing, the Department of Justice in the associated press releases nonetheless outlined the improper activities that were involved, conduct that we found extremely concerning. In our view, we would be derelict in our duty to protect the Medicare program from fraud, waste, and abuse if we simply ignored them. And I share this with you because I find it absolutely appalling that CMS is saying, well, in these press releases, DOJ said XYZ, and therefore we're taking it as true, even though the facility did not admit, and the Department of Justice acknowledged that it was not an admission of wrongdoing. CMS is looking to press releases to make this heightened scrutiny a requirement for nursing homes now, whether they're going through CHALs, reorganizations, or revalidations. So what does that mean from a practical standpoint? What does heightened scrutiny involve? This slide here is what we normally had, right? This is the initial low risk. They verify that you meet all applicable federal regulations and state requirements prior to making an enrollment determination. They verify licenses, and they do database checks on a pre and post enrollment basis to ensure that the nursing home continues to meet enrollment criteria. So that's what we've had up to date, and that initial piece is still in place. But then we add this next level, which is moderate level for screening for revalidation. All nursing homes that are going to go through the Medicare revalidation process are going to have an on-site visit conducted by the NSVC, which is contracted now to an organization called Securitas. So if you get contacted, if you're in your Medicare revalidation period, you're going to have somebody from this contractor notify and come out to your building to verify that your enrollment information is accurate and to determine compliance with Medicare enrollment requirements. They're going to do this on-site visit, and it's going to be their recommendation whether you're able to furnish Medicare coverage items or services, or you fail to satisfy any of the Medicare enrollment requirements. You are not going to be revalidated until NSVC completes its on-site visit. So that's everybody who's gone through revalidations starting the beginning of January. But if you're going through a CHAL, you're also going to have this high-level screening, which means in addition to the last two slides that we just looked at, which involves that on-site screening, you're also going to have to submit fingerprints for a national background check for all individuals who have a 5% or greater direct or indirect ownership interest. And there will also be a fingerprint-based criminal history record check of the FBI's integrated automated fingerprint identification system on all persons with a greater or equal to 5% direct or indirect ownership interest. It's going to have a significant slowdown on how quickly the CHALs are going to proceed. So here we are under Medicare. We're at high risk, so therefore we're at this high level of screening, or for revalidations, we still have this moderate risk, which means the on-site visit for Medicare. CMS also said, you know what, we're going to do bump ups, which means if we're going to elevate an existing provider into a high-risk screening category, we're also going to make that adjustment, not just for that one provider, but we're going to make that screening level adjustment to all other enrolled and prospective providers that have the same licensed business name or legal business name and TIN, or that's a taxpayer ID number, as the provider or supplier for which the screening level was originally raised. So for those organizations that have the same legal business name and the same TIN, you're going to go through this screening. All of your entities are going to be raised accordingly. CMS also expanded the categories of parties covered by denial and revocation provisions to include managing organizations, officers, and directors. So I sit here and say, okay, what's DHS doing about all of this, right? So the end of December, DHS issued Medical Bulletin 9922-11, which said that effective February 27, they're going to be reinstating their provider enrollment requirements, which includes this categorical risk analysis. And they said starting February 27th, they're going to reinstitute the completion of fingerprint-based background checks or site visits for providers assigned to the high categorical risk level. And they're going to complete site visits for providers assigned to the moderate categorical risk level. So what does that mean? Where are we right now? Let me stop here. Right now for Medicare, we know that if we're a SNF and we're going through a CHOW or a reorg, we're considered high categorical risk. And if we're going through revalidation, we're a moderate categorical risk, which means site visit. So what is DHS doing? They don't know. Right now, what they are saying in the bulletin is if you're subject to the high categorical risk level and you were provisionally enrolled in Medicaid from March 1 through February 27 without fingerprint-based criminal background checks or a site visit, you're going to get a 30-day notice from DHS advising you that you have to submit your fingerprint-based criminal background checks by the date specified in the letter, and that DHS or its contractor will be conducting a site visit within the next 30 days. And if you don't comply with this, they're going to close you out and promise. The problem with this is, from Medicare's perspective, nursing homes weren't in the high categorical risk level until January 1. So I'm thinking everyone who was subject to a CHOW before then is probably okay. In terms of revalidation, still remains to be seen. If you're going through the revalidation Medicaid process and we're before this February 27 cutoff, you're still at that low level risk, right? So you don't get that on-site revalidation. I talked to counsel for Department of Health or Department of Human Services as recently as yesterday, and again this morning by email, saying what's DHS going to do, because the bulletin that I just referenced kicks you back to the older bulletins that have nursing homes at low level risk. And she said, well, my client, meaning DHS, intends to follow Medicare. I said, okay, well, how are you going to do that yet? I don't see anything in writing that says that's what you're doing. She said, well, that is what we're going to do. I said, okay, so are you doing site visits for these moderate categorical risks? She said, they're still thinking about it. She doesn't know what they're going to do, other than it's their intent to follow Medicare's categorical risk level assignments, but they have not quite figured out what that means yet. So stay tuned. If you look at the Medicaid bulletin, they give you this option here. If you have questions about enrollment, revalidation, site visits, or criminal background checks. So I included that for you, but I don't think they have any answers yet. I would tell you to stay tuned. We are watching this very carefully, and we'll provide additional information as soon as it becomes available. The other thing you need to stay tuned for is starting in October, and we'll spend more time really digging into what this means at the DOH intensive webinars that are coming up in a month. But right now, know that when you apply for your license renewal to the Department of Health starting in October, you're going to have to report persons who have a greater than 5% or more direct or indirect ownership interest in your facility. You're also going to have to identify people who hold a license or ownership interest in the land on which your building is located or in the building. So I've got, bricks and mortar, but they also want who owns the dirt. So not only people who've got the ownership interest in the operator, but we're looking now at the propco, and we may also be looking at the landlord. In addition, Department of Health is also expecting you on your licensure renewals to identify persons who own a whole or part interest in any mortgage, deed, trust, note, or other long-term liability secured in whole or in part by your equipment that's used in the SNF or on the land or in the building. Huge vista of information that they're requiring. In addition, they're going to want you to be reporting officers and directors if you're a nonprofit, all your partners, the name and license number of the administrator, any person who has an interest in the management of the facility. Now, that's an interesting word there, right? What's an interest in the management of the facility? Still to be defined. And also identify your officers and members of the board of directors. So that's a lot of information that Department of Health will be gathering, to be determined if they're also going to be double checking that information against the CMS filed information. But note that Department of Health is asking for more than even CMS is looking at in terms of your propco and landlords. So that's coming down the pike. And what would I want to leave you with, for your next steps? I would urge you to check your enrollment information. We've talked to a couple facilities that haven't updated. I don't know what happened if they missed their Medicare revalidations, which are supposed to be every 5 years. But like I said, their information was so old, it took them a long time to get someone authorized even to go in and change the information. If you're not on PCOS yet, certainly go to that Medicare Compare site and see what information is out there and start making those corrections now. I would also urge you to identify more than one person to access your enrollment information so that you always have somebody with the ability to update when those changes happen. Remember that 30-day requirement in terms of who we have to notify, because if you're late, it used to be, years ago, not a big deal, but Medicare is really stepping up, as is Department of Human Services, in terms of turning the cash off. There are also sanctions, revocations, and all sorts of things that can really put a crimp in your cash flow. So you want to make sure that you're cleaning up your house now, particularly since we know this new wave is coming. stay tuned. We'll be issuing updates about what these on-site visits are going to look like, especially if DHS does what I think they're going to do, which is require on-site revalidation visits. And then create a tickler system, right? You want to make sure you're on top of this so that you know, if you're a nonprofit and your boards change, you got to update that information pretty quickly, especially if somebody's an officer or delegated official. But likewise, if your nursing home administrators are turning over with great frequency and they're listed as your managing employee, which they probably should be, make sure you're getting that reporting, not just to the Department of Health, but also to CMS. And with that, I know we have a few minutes left for questions. Happy to entertain them.
Yeah, so Paula, a few questions came in through the chat feature. Steve asked, how will fingerprints be provided for screening?
It will probably go the same way that, at least on the DHS side, that we're already doing fingerprint screenings for background checks under OPSA and Child Protective Services Act under CPSL. I don't know how Medicare is going to require it, and if there's going to be a tie-in at this point between CMS and DHS to get that information. For some organizations, it's not going to be a problem because they're already complying with fingerprinting. But for other organizations, I think it's going to be a real challenge. And from a child perspective, in particular, a change of ownership, getting the background checks turned around quickly and the fingerprinting, especially on that high-level scrutiny category, it takes a long time. So I think folks who thought deals were going to go pretty quickly, I'm advising you start building in extra time for that process.
And then Paula, an additional question from Steve. What's the best way to check when Medicare and Medicaid revalidation will be due?
Medicare, if you're on PICOS, they have a tab that you can click on that will show you where you are in your Medicare revalidation process. For Medicaid, they're sending out letters, but I would look, Steve, to see where I am in terms of my 5-year renewal time. Because if I'm close to 5 years, I'm thinking you're probably getting close. I'm also seeing a lot more activity from DHS on these revalidations. So I am thinking, to the extent they slowed down during COVID, there's a huge push now to get current.
All right, and those are all of the questions that have been submitted. Once again, if you have a question after today's session, please feel free to email myself or Paula. Paula's contact information is currently up on the screen. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. Thanks so much, Paula, for this wealth of knowledge today.
Thanks, my pleasure. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.